Hello, and welcome to another Python project walkthrough tutorial on the Future Programmer YouTube channel. In this project of the Python Fundamentals course, we will be practicing our skills working with JSON data using Python. Specifically, we will be creating a quiz application that utilizes JSON formatted files to store relevant data. So without further ado, let's get started. The main idea behind this quiz application program in Python is that we will be storing the quiz data in JSON format. So all of the questions, the answer choices, the correct answers will be stored inside JSON files on our computer. And then we'll use Python to read in that quiz data from the files and handle the user interactions, like presenting the questions, answer choices, and collecting the user's answers. While for the main concept, I have only written file operations, and using the JSON module in Python, there's a lot more that you'll get to practice in this program. I suggest that you pause this video for a few minutes and try to write this program out yourself. And then come on back to this video and I will show you how I have implemented this quiz application program. Before we're able to get started writing this program, there's some file setup that we need to do since we'll be working with external files in this program. Right now I have opened the File Explorer on my computer and opened my C drive. Now it doesn't really matter which directory you're in as long as you can access that folder. So I'm going to make a folder in which our program file and data files are going to live. So I'm going to right click, then go to new and make a new folder. I will call this quiz application. Feel free to name this whatever you want. And I will press enter. And then I will double click on this folder. And this is where our Python file as well as our JSON files will live. So I'm going to make the Python file first, which is our program file. So I'm going to right click, go to new, and make a new text document, which by default comes with the name new text document with a file extension .txt. But since we want to make this a Python file, we want it to end in a .py extension. I'm going to call this file quiz.py. Feel free to name this whatever you want, as long as it ends with a .py extension. And then I'm going to press enter. You'll see Windows asking you whether you want to change the file extension. You want to click yes. And now you can see this is now a Python file. And then I'm going to make the JSON file that I will be using for this program. Now, if you want to make multiple JSON files for multiple quizzes, feel free to do that. I will only be making one. So I'm going to, again, go to new after right clicking. And then I'm going to go to text document. And this time, we will be making a JSON file. So I'm going to call this quiz.json. Now, if you would like to make multiple quizzes, say one for math, math.json, another for, say, science.json, feel free to do that. I'm just going to make one called quiz.json, and I'll press enter. Again, you want to click yes, and you can see this is a JSON file. And that's pretty much all we need to do before we can get started writing our quiz application program. So now I have the quiz application folder that we just created open inside Sublime Text, which is the code editor that I'm going to use to write this program. Feel free to use any other editing environment that you would like to use though. Right now, both the quiz.json and the quiz.py files are empty. Let's first populate the quiz.json file with the data of our quiz. Now, in JSON, data types are quite similar to those in Python, just with different names but similar syntax. For instance, if you want to create a list, which is actually called an array in JSON, we can just write a pair of square brackets, and inside are going to be the elements of this array. In quiz.json, I'm going to write an array inside of which are the individual questions of the quiz. And each question is going to be represented by a dictionary, which in JSON is actually called an object. But note that this object is very different from an object in Python. It's basically a collection of key value pairs. And the first key is going to be ID, which is going to be the ID of the question. So the first question I'm going to create has an ID of 1. And it also has a key called question, which is going to be the text of the question, which is, let's just create a simple question first. What is 1 plus 1? And then we also have another key value pair with the key of choices. So those are the multiple choices that the user is able to choose from. In this case, it's going to be a list containing the elements 1, 2, 3, and 4. Lastly, we have the correct answer. So let's just call it answer. And it's going to be 2 in this case. I have actually created 4 questions in a JSON file. So I'm actually going to paste the content in, and you can see we have IDs 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are the 4 questions in our quiz. Feel free to change any of the things that you see up here, including the questions, the choices, the correct answers, and so on. So we have what is 1 plus 1? What is the fastest land animal? Which metal is heavier between gold and silver? And what's the smallest among the world's oceans? So now we have quiz.json complete, we can get started writing our program in quiz.py, so our Python program. The first thing that we want to do is to probably read the data from our quiz.json file. So let's create a function called readData, which is going to take no parameters, and it's going to first open a connection to the quiz.json file. So with open quiz.json in a reading only mode, and let's call this file object as file. And then we want to parse this data because when the content of this file is first read, it's going to be a string. We want to convert the string and parse it into a valid Python object. For that, we can use the JSON module of the Python standard library. So you want to write import JSON. And the JSON.load function takes the file object that we have made up here, and it will parse the content inside this file and then return a valid Python object. So let's just call this variable data. Then let's just return data from this function. Let's see if this function works by calling read data, and let's store it in a variable called data. And just print out data along with its type, its length, and as well as its first item, so index 0. Now let's run this file, and you can see this is the object returned from the read data function. So this is what's going to be returned from json.load file. It's a list, as you can see here, which has a length of 4, and this is the first element in it. You can see this is a Python dictionary. It has the keys ID, question, choices, and answer, as well as the different values associated to those keys. So now we're able to read the data from the file. We want to make a function that will allow us to print the question onto the screen and allow the user to give back answers. So let's call this function question. It's going to take a parameter called data. And data is going to be simply something that looks like this. This is the first data, and the second data is going to have an ID of 2, and so on. So question will take data as parameter, and the first thing it will do is to print out question, and let's just print out its ID. So question 1, question 2, question 3. Data ID. Because data is a Python dictionary, we can access its values by specifying their keys and passing it inside a pair of square brackets. Let's just add a colon at the end. And then we want to print out the question. So just print out data question. So that's going to print out what is 1 plus 1 in this case. So now we've printed out the question. We want to present the choices that the user is able to choose from. So before we do that, let's actually first shuffle the answer choices so they're different each time. Right now it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 every time we run the program. But to make it even more fun, let's shuffle the answer choices so they're presented in a different order each time. For that, we can use the random module in the Python standard library. We can write import random. And in the question function, let's call the random.shuffle function with the choices. So the choices right here. So data choices. And it's not going to return anything, so it will just shuffle this list in place. Now we have a choice to make, I guess. We can either ask the user to type 1, 2, 3, or 4 and use that as the answer. Or we can make it easier for them, so we will present the choices like this. So A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, D is 4. Perhaps with a different order right here, but you get the idea. A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, and D is 4. And they can just type in A, B, C, D as opposed to typing out the actual answer. So I'm going to go with that approach. And how I'm going to do it is, well, we want to make the options, which is the options that the user can choose from. So A, B, C, D. And let's make a dictionary, choices. After this line, choices is going to look something like this. So it will have A is going to be, let's say 2, since we shuffled it, right? So B is going to be, say 1, and C is going to be 3, and D is going to be 4. Something that looks like this. How we can do that is we can use dictionary comprehension. So the key is going to be A, B, C, and D. So we're going to specify options with an index I. We'll worry about what I is in just a moment. Then we have data, choices, I. Data choices is going to be the list containing the shuffled version of 1, 2, 3, 4, and we want to specify index I. So what is I? Well, inside dictionary comprehension, we have to have a for loop. So for I in range len of data choices. So I is going to be the range of the length of the choices. In this case, it will be 0, 1, 2, 3, since this length function call is going to return 4. So range of 4 is 0, 1, 2, 3. And so options I with 0 is going to be A, options 1 is B, option 2 is C, and options 3 is D. And data choices I is going to be a similar story. So now we have the choices created. We want to present the choices to the user so they can choose from it. So for each option choice, inside choices.items, choices.items is going to return the key value pairs inside choices as tuples. So we want to iterate through choices.items and print out, let's print out a space in the front. And let's print out the option, which is going to be A, B, C, or D. And let's print out a dot and a space. And let's print out the string version of the choice. And let me just call the question function real quick with the read data 0 as the parameter. Let's call this, and we can see question 1, what is 1 plus 1? And we have the answer choices A, B, C, D, and it turns out this is actually not shuffled, or it doesn't have a different order at least, although we can see this is actually shuffled. Let's run it again, and we can see it's in another order. So that's good. So now we have presented the options and the choices for the user. We want to have them choose and see if they have gotten the correct answer. So let's create a variable called answer. which is equal to input your answer. And this is going to be where the user is going to input what they think the correct answer is. So how can we verify whether they have answered correctly? Well, I'm going to verify two things. Either they have entered A, B, C, or D, or they might have also entered 2, 1, 4, or 3, if someone would rather just enter 2 when they say 1 plus 1, rather than looking for its corresponding option. So we want to first check if choices, so inside choices, choices is going to look something like this, right? So we're going to have A, 1, and so on. So we want to see if the user has entered A, which corresponds, let's say, to 2. So if the user has entered A, which corresponds to 2, then they have gotten it correct. So we want to use the .get method and look for the value associated to the key of answer. So if they've entered A, we want to look for the value whose key is A. And if this is equal to data answer, then we want to tell them that they got it right. So choices.get answer is going to return either 2, 1, 4, or 3. And data answer is going to be, well, it's going to be 2, right? So we want to check if this is correct. And the reason why I used the .get method is because they might not have entered A, B, C, or D. They might have entered 2, 1, 3, or 4. In which case, if we used the square bracket method, then it may return, it's going to raise a key error since it's not actually inside the dictionary. So if this is equal to the correct answer, or if answer is directly equal to the string version of data answer. So if the user's input is equal to the correct answer directly, we want to convert it to a string because whatever the user has entered is going to be a string as well. If either of those conditions are met, we want to print out correct. Otherwise, which means they got it wrong, we want to print out sorry, incorrect. And let's just print out the correct answer, which is going to be the correct answer is, it's converted to a string of data answer. So let's take a look at whether this would work. Let's run this program. What is 1 plus 1? I can answer 2 and press enter. And you can see I got it correct. Let's run this program again and enter D this time. We can see, sorry, incorrect. The correct answer was 2. Well, right now I entered a lowercase d, which doesn't match the uppercase d in the choices dictionary. So let's make this an uppercase and try this again. Let's try A this time since this is going to be A is 2. I pressed escape on accident, so let's try this again with the correct answer choice, D. And you can see I got it correct this time. And if I had entered an incorrect answer like 1, it would tell us that the correct answer is actually 2. So with the first question, this is working. So how can we make it so that each question inside the quiz.json file gets asked and the user is able to respond to each question? Let's make a main function for that. And the main function is going to first read the data, so read data, and let's store in a variable called data. And for I in range len data, so len of data is going to be 4, and range of 4 is going to give us a list containing 0, 1, 2, 3. So we want to have I take on each of those values and use the question corresponded to that. So we want to call the question function with data I. So the first question is going to be, well, this question, which is data 1 or 0, and then data 1, data 2, data 3. And let's see if this works. So let me run this program again. After I call the main function, what is 1 plus 1? Let's enter 2, correct. What is the fastest land animal? Let's say if I think it's lion, which is not, you can see, sorry, incorrect. The correct answer is cheetah. Which metal is heavier between gold and silver? It is gold, so let's enter B. And we can see correct. What is the smallest among the world's oceans? And let's say if I think it's the Pacific Ocean, we want to enter D, which is incorrect. The correct answer is the Arctic Ocean. So everything is working fine. How can we make it so that we're able to see how many questions we got correct though? Well, we can make a variable, or two variables, the first one being total, which is equal to 0 at first. So that is going to keep track of the number of questions that the user has answered. And correct is going to be equal to 0 as well. And correct is going to be the number of questions that the user has answered correctly. And inside this for loop, after the user has answered a question, we can write total plus equal 1. How can we deal with the correct though? Well, we can return something from inside this question function that will tell us whether the user has gotten the correct answer. So why don't we return 1 if the user got it right, and return 0 if they got it wrong. And then we can actually directly increment the correct variable by whatever is returned. So if the user got it right, this function call is going to return 1, in which case correct will be incremented by 1. If they got it wrong, this is 0, so correct is not changed. Now we want to print out how many they got it right. So you got correct out of total. And now let's run this program. What is 1 plus 1? 2. What is the fastest land animal? Let's try to type this out this time. Cheetah, which is correct. Gold, also correct. What is the smallest among the world's oceans? Let's just try, let's say, the Atlantic Ocean, which is incorrect. Let's try that. Now we can see, sorry, incorrect. The correct answer is the Arctic Ocean. And we can see you got 3 out of 4 since I got the first 3 questions right and got the last question incorrectly. So everything is working fine, although you may have seen that the output was a little bit crowded and you couldn't really see too much of what is going on. And for that, we can use the CLS command or clear command in the case of Linux and Mac to clear the terminal. So we want to import the OS module, and when we enter the main function, let's write os.system CLS. What this is going to do is it's going to call the CLS command in command prompt. Now, if you're on Linux or Mac, you want to write clear, since that will clear the terminal for you. Now, if you're on some editing environments like IDLE, it may not work for you since it's actually not a proper terminal. After we write total plus equals to 1, we can call this function again. So CLS. And let's try this again. We can see the prompt above was cleared, and we can just see only the question, which is good. So let's try 2, and you can see it skipped to the next question. The problem right now, though, is that we didn't see whether we got the correct answer or not, because it directly cleared the terminal as soon as we entered the question. And for that, we can pause the program using the time.sleep function. So import time. And before we clear the terminal, let's just pause the program for 1 second. You'll see how this works out in just a moment. Quiz.py. What is 1 plus 1? Let's answer A, 4. And you can see, sorry, incorrect. The correct answer was 2. So that was enough time for us to read whether we got it right or not. And let's try leopard. which is incorrect. Let's try gold, and let's try, say, the Arctic Ocean, which is incorrect somehow. Well, the problem with that was, I believe with answer here, we want to turn it to a lowercase first, and do the same with the correct answer. Let's try this again. Try lion, and gold. And if I type the lowercase Arctic Ocean and press enter, we can see I got it correct this time, and I got 3 out of 4. So hopefully this program has shown you how we can use JSON formatted data with JSON files, and how we can work with those files using Python. So JSON format is really convenient for storing data, and even for people who don't necessarily need to know programming, it's pretty easy to understand and pretty easy to write. That's the power of JSON combined with that of Python. And that's it for this quiz application project, as well as the entire Python fundamentals course. If you've been watching those videos since the very start, then congratulations, you've come a long way since Hello World, and now you've mastered some of the most essential concepts in Python programming, and you're able to create many exciting and complex programs on your own. At the end of the day, Python is an extremely versatile programming language that is capable of creating virtually anything you can think of, be it artificial intelligence, machine learning, data science, or game development and web applications. With that said, I will continue making programming tutorials on this Future Programmer YouTube channel. So if you're interested in learning more about programming and technology, then make sure to hit that subscribe button down below so you won't miss anything. Lastly, I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video, as well as joining me on this journey of Python fundamentals. So thank you for watching, and happy programming!